Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag. I don't know who sent out the memo for everyone else on BookTube to do it at the start of June, but I didn't get the message. Also, it's mid-year now in July, not June. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is I know most of BookTube has done this, but I'm still going to do this tag because it is my favorite tag and I had so much fun doing it for the first time last year. I wanted to do it again and I think it's really fun to reflect on what you've read this year. Also think about where you want to take your reading for the second half of the year. My reading this year has been amazing. I've never read as much as I have in a single year as I have this year. I have just reached my Goodreads goal of 96 books. And it's the 10th of July today. Insane. Absolutely insane. I do not know how that happened. Honestly, I think it's BookTube and doing BookTube and just being more excited about books than I ever have been. So the first question for this tag is the best book you have read in 2020. This was so hard for me and I honestly made my decision by making sure that all my favorite books were included in one of the questions for this tag. So the one that was narrowed down and kind of allocated best book is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I don't know if this is going to get best book of 2020. Like I said, it was kind of like a narrowing down tactic that made me answer this book for this question, but it's up there. It's really up there. I read this book for Believathon. I just fell in love with it. I keep saying that it's a Studio Ghibli movie in book form, and that's exactly what it is. It's a story that follows Luna, who is a girl who, when she was a baby, her village sacrificed her to the witch. The village that she comes from, they believe that in order to keep the witch happy and to keep themselves safe, the youngest baby of the year must be sacrificed to this witch, and the sacrifice happens by leaving that baby in the forest for the witch to take. The witch does take Luna, but the witch is not evil like the villagers believe, and instead she raises Luna. There's so much more to the story than that, but I'm going to leave it there. It's just a stunning story and you just need to read it. It's not very long at all and it is a middle grade. I just cannot recommend it enough. The second question is best sequel you have read in 2020. Hands down, this goes to Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold. These two books make me speechless. I don't know how to talk about them. They were both incredible. I'm in love with these characters. I'm in love with these worlds. I had read City of Brass when it first came out, and then I decided in June that I wanted to reread City of Brass and then read these two sequels because the final book, Empire of Gold, did come out in June, and I binge read the entire trilogy and it was just the best reading experience I've had this year. I can honestly say that. So these two books, in particular Kingdom of Copper, is up for my best book of 2020. I feel like most of BookTube have been raving about this series and praising it, and I'm so glad because I think it deserves every single bit of hype that it gets. And if you have not read it, I highly recommend it. This is an adult fantasy book, but I think it's one of those adult fantasy books that's a really good bridge between adult and YA. There's a lot of world building, but I just don't think the world building goes over your head. It's quite straightforward, but we still get the complexity of all these different characters and all these different houses and conflicts, which I just love. We start off in ancient Cairo and we are following a girl called Nari, who is kind of like the street rat, and she works as a con artist. She accidentally brings back this ancient jinn. From there they go on to this journey to the City of Brass, which is also this city where all the jinn live, and she finds out her real identity. It's all about these different jinn and all the conflicts that they have between one another. There's like different houses and each house has like a different particular ability, so there's a lot of magic involved, and I love it. It just has so many things that it explores. I love the characters. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later on because I do use it to answer another question, so I'll leave it at that for now. The third question for this tag is what is a new release that you have not gotten to yet? So many. The first one that comes to mind is Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the sequel to Foundry Side. I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm actually planning on picking it up within the next couple of days because I will be buddy reading the book with Ishi from Ishi Time. He's one of my really good friends here. We've read the first book together last year, so it's a series that we are taking on together and I'm so excited to get to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I also haven't read A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't know if I'm going to read that. I was originally intending to reread the Hunger Games trilogy and then read that book, but now it's been out for a while. I never got around to rereading the Hunger Games. It's one of those books that's just everywhere that I feel like I've heard so much about it that I've already read it, so I think I will end up reading it, but not probably for a couple of years. I might be in the mood later on in the year and pick it up on a whim, but at the moment I don't really have a strong desire to. What is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2020? Easily The Burning God. This is going to be the last book in the Poppy War series. I love the Poppy War. I read the Poppy War and the Dragon Republic last year and they were both some of my favorite books of the year, Dragon Republic was probably in the top 3. If you haven't heard of the Poppy War, we are following a girl called Rin. In order to escape an arranged marriage that her family wants to marry her off in, she enters a military academy. It's her journey and her climb to the top, and she is ruthless and she will do anything to get there. It's not entirely clear yet, but in some sense it does feel like a villain origin story, but I don't want to dub it as that. That might not be the intention of the author, because like so many of the characters are just doing so many of the wrong things in order to get what they want, and it really shows how that happens on War. And there is also this magical element to it where basically these characters get high and have the gods sort of harness their bodies so that they could harness their magic. It's really insane. It's just a very captivating and fascinating story, and Rin's one of the most fascinating characters I've ever read about, because she's one of those characters you connect with less and less as time goes on, which I actually don't think I've really experienced before, but I become more intrigued as the story goes on by her story and by her, because I don't know what the hell she's going to do next and I'm scared. Question 5 is biggest disappointment. This so easily goes to Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I read this in January as a buddy read with my friend Olivia. We were really excited for this, and unfortunately it did not meet either of our expectations. I know this book is so well loved, especially in the fantasy community, and I didn't like it. I gave it 3.5 at the time, but looking back, I actually think it's a lower rating. Like, I think it's a 3 or a 2.75. I had multiple issues with it. There is a fat phobia in it. No one talks about the fat phobia, but there is so blatantly fat phobia. If you plan on picking it up, there's a character in this called Sister Rose, and every single time she's mentioned on the page, there is some description about how she's fat. There'll be a description about how she moves and her body wobbles, or sometimes like Mark Lawrence tries to do it in like a really subtle way, but it's so obvious to me. That really got me angry. I didn't feel connected to any of the characters. I didn't feel like characters' relationships had any deep connection. The best way I could describe this book is the entire thing felt like a prologue. And you know, with prologues, it's always like you're looking into a story and you get a peek for what the story is going to be and what to expect, but without really getting to know the characters in the prologue or anything like that. You just kind of get a look into the setup. That's exactly what this entire book felt like for me, and I kept waiting to feel like I was in the book and actually reading it, but I was very, very distant. If you're not on Twitter, you might not have heard, but there were some really not nice things about Mark Lawrence that came out, so just to add on top of disappointment, there was that. And if you haven't heard of this book, it is about magical assassin nuns. The next question is your favorite new author. I'm not entirely sure on my answer to this question, because I do like to have read at least more than one book, at least 2, before I make the decision that this author who is new to me is a favorite. But 2 strong contenders are Fonda Lee, who wrote the Jade City trilogy. I've just read Jade City and I loved it. I really, really loved how she did her characters. It's an urban fantasy where the magic is to do with jade. These characters wear jade to enhance strength, to enhance all sorts of abilities, and the way the politics of the world works is whoever has the strongest amount of jade is the strongest family, and it's kind of like mafia families. It's really, really cool. The second one I would say is Octavia E. Butler. I did read Kindred, and I'm also halfway through a second book of hers, and I really enjoy her writing. I think she's a very clever, brilliant woman, and I want to read all her work. I do have a vlog coming up soon where I talk about Kindred, so I won't talk about it much here. Question 8 for this tag is newest fictional crush. I don't really get crushes, so I'm changing this question to newest fictional child because I get new children, and that has to go to Keith from the Keeper of the Lost Cities series, which is a middle grade series that I've been working my way through this year, and Keith is just my child. Like, every time he shows up on the page, I'm just like, you poor precious person. This is a story about owls, and it's just like a fun adventure story. There's the chosen one trope, and Keith is one of the side characters who I just really love to read about. He's just so precious. He's my child, so there we go. Question 9 is newest favorite character, and I think that has to go to Nari from City of Brass. I really love how she's very headstrong and she's really clever, and she really does endure a lot, so she's so strong in so many aspects. But my favorite thing about Nari is she's a healer, and if I was ever to live in a fantasy world, I would definitely be a healer. I love her learning about healing and wanting to be a good healer, and also sort of the struggles that like a healer goes through, like, you know, losing someone that you tried to save or not being able to save everyone. I just really like that whole aspect of her storyline, and yeah, she's just a character I really, really connect to. And the other character I would say that's a new favorite is Jesse Blackthorn, which I feel like no one loves Jesse, but like I do. I love him because he's just an angsty ghost teenager. Like, isn't that everything? Question 10 is what book made you cry? I recently reread Looking for Ella Brandy by Melina Macheda, which is Look, it's probably my favorite book of all time. I hesitate to say that because I'm very indecisive, but this book is a book I see myself a lot in, particularly when I was younger, and every time I revisit that book and read it, which I usually do once a year, it always makes me really, really emotional. It's an older book actually. It was published in the early 90s. It pretty much just follows Josie Alibrandi for 1 year and her life. What I love about it is Josie is second generation Italian Australian, and it talks a lot about culture, what it's like to live in Australia and also be Italian, and it also talks about Josie's relationship with her family. That's a very heavy theme, and her father comes into her life for the first time. She grew up not knowing her father and being raised by a single mom. They start to form a relationship. It's an amazing story, and I think for a book that was published over 20 years ago, it's really incredible to see so many of the topics it discussed because they're still so relevant to today. Question 11 is, what is a book that made you happy? And for this, it has to go to the Keeper of the Lost Cities trilogy. It's not a trilogy, it's a series. Keeper of the Lost Cities. I almost did it again. Keeper of the Lost Cities series. Got it. And like I said, this is a series I've been working my way through this year. I've actually been picking up the audiobooks of these books every time I felt kind of slumpy or I kind of need to have my mood brought up. I've been relying on these books because they are middle grade, so there's not, you know, a large amount of dark topics in it, and it's just so fun, and I love all the characters and I just love going back. This series has truly been a pick-me-up in my times of need. Question 12 is, what is the most beautiful book you have brought this year? I haven't received it yet, but I did buy the Fairy Loot edition of A Song of Wraith and Ruin, which if you haven't seen that edition, it is stunning. It has green sprayed edges, but I haven't gotten it yet. I will be doing a book haul and that will be featured in it, and I'm hoping to also unbox it in that book haul because I've never gotten anything from Fairy Loot, and I did buy this book for myself kind of as a birthday present because it was expensive, so I splurged. I'm so excited to get it and to see it and to have it in my hands and also to read it. The last question for this tag is, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? All of them if possible. The top 2 ones though is definitely The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I would love to get up to date with The Way of Kings before the end of the year, in particular before the new release in November. I think the next book comes out. I have though started The Way of Kings. I'm not that far in. I am hoping to finish it in July, and the second book is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I have literally owned this entire trilogy, that's right, entire trilogy, not just the first book, the entire trilogy, for 3 years. I don't know what's wrong with me. I really don't, but I'm determined to get to that. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know some of your answers for these questions. I hope you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I'll see you next time. Bye!